Okay, so I just wanted to go over a few things with the task that I've set. So you've been asked to produce a preliminary orthographic sketch including the elevation, plan and an end elevation of the assembled toy. These sketches must be drawn in good proportion and with enough information to enable the parts of the modelling using 3D CAD software. So you have to pick one of the toys or design one of your own. The only requirements for the toy is it needs to fit in with the style that IKEA have. So if you're going to do a figure, it has to be this sort of thing with a hat, a wee face, body. And if you're going to be doing one of the cars, it has to look like it would fit in with one of them. Just wanted to go over a few things in the important section. So firstly, it has to be drawn in good proportions. You don't have this toy to measure, you're making up the sizes as you go, so all your sizes need to make sense. So if the diameter of this has to be 80, you have to consider that for your overall height when it comes to this as well. I would start off my drawing by drawing in all my construction lines for where everything's going to go, rather than drawing the elevation right up here in the middle and then finding out later on you don't have enough room for the plan. It's best to draw it all and have a look at your proportions. Proportions pretty much just mean that it's not going to look too narrow or too wide or too tall or too short, and it all looks roughly right. All your sizes need to be transferred up to your plan and along to your end elevation so that everything is the same height or the same width. You can't have a plan that is then really narrow, because when you look at the top of something, it doesn't instantly get smaller. So that is good proportions. Next thing I want to talk about quickly is dimensioning. All your dimensioning has to be within British standards. Some of the main mistakes that people make is the arrows they make are just normal arrows like this. They need to be long, skinny and filled in. These arrows are not correct. All your dimensioning lines need to meet up, cannot touch the actual object, because these are as dark as outlines. If they're just connecting to it, it can then look like an outline, so there has to be a little gap. You have to make sure you dimension your radiuses when there's circles that aren't full circles. So I've even forgot to do this in some instances over here. On any round edge that you then fill it, if you're making this in Inventor, because there's also where it says here, has to be enough information to enable the part to be modelled using 3D CAD software. So you have to have all these sizes in. Like this part, I've not put any sizes in, which I would have to do. So half circles, you're doing an R at the end for radius, and when you're dimensioning full circles, you have to do a circle with a line through it, which is the diameter symbol. So next part, you need to make sure that you're doing this sort of falls into British standards as well. So you have to make sure that you're doing centre lines. I've not asked on this to do hidden detail, but because there's really not many instances of where hidden detail would actually be necessary for this. Maybe the hand when you're on this side, but not too much. If you're maybe doing one of the vehicles, maybe it's appropriate to do hidden detail there, but we're not worrying about that too much just now. You need to make sure though you have centre lines. If we just had an elevation and we didn't have a plan, you wouldn't be able to tell this was a circular object, you would just be guessing. So this centre line tells you that this is a circular object. You also need to have centre lines, centre points, of anywhere that you're going to be doing a circle, and then that would have to have a size itself. So down here I've got two centre marks, and then I've got the dimensioning for it, because you would need that for when you're modelling it on Inventor or anything else. Last thing, you have to have a clear difference between construction lines and outlines. On this, I started off by drawing my construction lines, and I drew them all really lightly. One thing I would say is that I'd like you to be sketching this rather than using a ruler. Main thing is that You can use a straight edge as a guide, but I think if you do the full thing as a sketch, any squint lines or any mistakes are sort of forgiven because it's a sketch and there's sort of inconsistencies throughout the full thing. It's more apparent when you're doing a circle. If I was to draw this all with a straight edge, and then draw my circle freehand, the circle would just look completely off. But since I've done the full thing freehand, then you can give it, then you can sort of allow for mistakes, especially my centre line's a bit squint, but it all looks okay because it's all a tiny bit off throughout the full thing. If you're using a straight edge, drawing construction lines is even harder, because when you're using a ruler and you draw your line along, you tend to do that a wee bit darker. But if you're doing it freehand and not using any equipment at all, you can stand back, look back at it, and then fix any mistakes. Like the first line I drew here was a bit squint. Once I drew the full thing, I was able to recognise that this line was a bit squint, and then I just fixed it up. There has to be a clear difference between these lines and your outlines. You can't just do these lines then rub them out, because then there's no construction lines and you wouldn't get any marks for that. When you're doing your construction lines as well, you need to make sure you're transferring over all your sizes, so these are then all the same over here. So just transfer your lines over, drawing a straight line, and if it's a little bit out, it's not the end of the world. It should all look okay. So if you've got any more questions on that, just ask me in the comments. Hope that helped.